The following is presented by Loretto on the Plains Personal Care Home, an outreach of Holy Family Ministry Center in Hartley, Texas, with founders Ed and Nan Weber.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed.
And I'm Nan.
We come to you today from Loretto on the Plains Personal Care Home, an outreach of the Holy Family Ministry Center in Hartley, Texas, to the sick and terminally ill at the end of life. Now and at the Hour of Our Death is a program developed for educating our listeners on issues surrounding the end of life by giving information and answering questions which they may have about these issues. Last week's program challenged us to answer the call of Jesus and become good Samaritans.
Jesus was asked what commandment was the greatest, and his reply was, love the Lord your God with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole soul, and your neighbor as yourself. To that, the scholar, trying to trap Jesus, said, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus answered him with the parable of the Good Samaritan. Then he proceeded to turn to that scholar and hand him back the question, which one was the good neighbor?
He answered, the one who treated him with mercy. Jesus replied, then go and do the same. This is the command which Jesus left us, and this is our challenge. Can you imagine a world in which everyone looked upon others truly as their neighbor? As Pope John Paul II points out in the Apostolic Letter on the Christian meaning of human suffering, we are all called to be good Samaritans and to follow this example.
Last week, we also examined a few of the most important reasons why we do not respond as fast as we should, and perhaps not at all. Some of those factors that we're scared, we're afraid of what to say. Some people are frightened to go into a hospital. Maybe they don't want to use the word frightened, but extremely uncomfortable to go in and visit someone who's sick, so they just don't. Some of the other things are a fear of intruding on someone. We don't want to be in the way, and so we don't visit. Being overwhelmed. Many times we look at our lives and our lives are so busy. We're running here, we're running there, we're running the next place. Just the thought of another thing to do often overwhelms us and we don't do it. And then there's always the fear of starting something that we can't finish. We're afraid that we're going to start visiting with someone, and then we're going to visit again, and we're going to visit again, and then one day we're not going to be able to visit, and we don't want to disappoint the person. Sometimes we're just plain too busy and overcommitted, and the list goes on and on. Many of us can come up with lots more reasons than that. That's why we don't carry through with this command of Jesus, then go and do the same. We began to share some of the options open to us last week that will help us to be less afraid, and today we will continue to explore these avenues of help that will free us to do so, free us to have confidence to go to the hospital, to a home, to the person who's in need.
As we rediscover the Good Samaritan within, let us also look at Matthew 25, where Jesus speaks of the final judgment and concludes with, when you have done this to the least of these my brothers, you have done it to me. Very often we forget that my brothers means my neighbor, means anyone needing assistance.
You know, Ed, I was thinking, or watching one of the films of the Lives of the Saints, and I was really impressed that one of the things that was so important in the research on that person's life was how they affected the people that lived around them. And that impressed me so much that the Good Samaritan in my home, in the neighborhood, the people in the family or friends became even more relevant for me, and even more so those people that we didn't know that reached out and needed reaching out to. The possibilities that we have been given to serve is phenomenal, and we're going to learn today how we can see those more clearly. So let's look at some of these fears that have kept us from visiting the sick. We'll start with the fear of what to say. Well, we're going to talk right now and share with you the 10 Commandments of Effective Listening, which we shared last week, but we're going to go over them again. Listening is developed by this hospice of the Valley, and it begins with stop talking.
Yes, stop talking. You cannot listen if you're talking.
The second one is to put the talker at ease. When you go into a home or a hospital or a sick person that you know in the nursing homes, make them feel at ease. Pull up a chair, sit down beside them. Give them that sense that you really want to be there.
When you go, you show the person that you want to listen. Look and act interested. Don't be distracted by picking up the daily paper, which may be laying there, or getting busy with something like that. Listen to understand rather than reply.
Now I would like to just add something to that usually families and close friends have a tendency to fuss around the room. Don't bother with fussing around the room. Just sit down and listen. The fourth commandment of effective listening is to remove distractions. Normally a family member, somebody really close to the person, might sit there and doodle while they're talking. That's a nonverbal communication. It shows that if you're tapping or you're shuffling around, says to this person that you're disinterested in what they have to say. Maybe it'd be a good idea if, to be more present to the person, you would ask if you could close the door so that you don't hear, if you're in a hospital or in a nursing home, you want private conversation and there's a lot of noise outside, so just close the door.
Another thing is to empathize with the person. Try to put yourself in his place so that you can see his point of view.
Just a little story. I remember being at your mom's after her house burnt down, and she had many episodes, and she was now pretty much out of it most of the time. But at this particular moment, everybody had gone outside and were games, talking, and I was left in the house with your mom. And she kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. And everybody would say to Granny, well, you are Granny. This is your home. But it just dawned on me that her home had burnt down, and this trailer was put on that very place. So to her, this was not home. And so when I just agreed with her that, no, this isn't your home, Granny, that you were in, but it's the trailer because your house had burned down, she said, oh, okay, and was very peaceful.
It's important to be patient. Allow plenty of time. Don't interrupt when the person you're visiting is talking, or don't start for the door or walk away being rude to them.
The next one is to hold your temper. Again, this can be a visitor who gets into a religious discussion, but it's normally a family member or a close friend that has these points of flare, hot points, you might say, in the relationship. Then the angry man gets oftentimes the wrong meaning out of words. So you're hearing the words, but you're not really hearing what's being said. So control your temper, hold your temper, and spend your time not worrying about yourself, but listening to what the other person's saying.
Go easy on arguments or criticism. This puts a person on the defensive, and the person may clam up or get angry. I remember when you used to visit with your sister Mary Ann that there were some heated arguments that you got into.
Yes, Mary Ann and I were both very strong in our points of view. Mine, a very Catholic point of view, and she had left the church. But it seemed like whenever we visited, before it was over, we were into these discussions that turned out to just be arguments and hurtful. And when she was lying on her deathbed, we were apologizing to one another, asking forgiveness. And one of the things that I asked forgiveness for was these arguments that we got into. And right away, she started to say something, and we both looked at each other and said, this isn't the time for that. And we hugged each other, and it was just like such a peace came over that wasn't the essence of our relationship or the love we had for one another.
Another thing in effective listening is to ask questions. If someone is talking or the person you're visiting said something, you can respond to them by asking a question, or you can ask other questions that would draw them into a conversation and help them to develop, what they're talking about more.
Well, we're going to talk about some of those later in the program. Some things like, did I understand you to say, or I can't imagine how that made you feel. And the last of the 10 commandments of effective listening is to stop talking. It starts with stop talking and it ends. This needs to come right into that realm of the fear we have to talk, is to realize that it's not about us talking. It's about us listening. That's far more important at this time.
When you're visiting, perhaps in the hospital or in the nursing home, talk with the person that you're seeing, especially if they're dying, as you would with a friend. Use humor when appropriate, and let them know that you're really interested.
Listen not only to what the patient is saying, but to what they're not saying. That is just so important. And don't minimize the patient's suffering by comparing it to yours. Listen to their story. On the other hand, we have times where we need to be vulnerable, where we need to tell a little bit of our story. But if you notice, the word is little bit, just enough where they can feel that, well, we have insecurities too. We have fears, and we are also vulnerable, so that they can feel comfortable in sharing and opening up and sharing with us, and not thinking that, oh, here, we're the great visitor and you're the poor patient. We don't want any of that kind of an attitude when we're visiting the sick. The other thing is that when we're visiting the sick, is if a patient is comatose or intubated, you still want to talk to them. As a matter of fact, you have to be very careful that you're not talking about a patient's condition or what's happening, or if there's a fear of the patient dying, or in any of those conversations, because the hearing is the last thing to go. And we can sing, we can read scripture, we can just talk to the people, tell them about what's happening in the family. But what we don't want to do is to talk to each other about their condition, because they do hear.
We'll go on and move on to some guidelines on helpful phrases from the hospice of the Texas Medical Center. These are 6 of them, the first of which is establishing rapport. And that's when you go into a room, you be friendly and jovial, like, well, or like, what's going on? Or how can I be most helpful to you? Or I'm here to listen. I've been thinking about you. Things that'll help to open up a conversation.
And you did the right thing to call, to reach out. Many times people will make that decision and then they literally feel stupid, they'll say, or they feel like they shouldn't have done that, or they were too weak. They need reassurance that that was the right thing for them to do. Another area is one, when you're visiting, is one of reflecting the feelings back. Now, as we talked about in good listening, we have to understand that to reflect feelings back, we have to be listening in the first place. We have to be listening not for what we want to say, but for what they are saying. So we might say something like, that must feel really depressing. That must feel so overwhelming. We might say something like, I'm sensing that you're very fearful right now. And then the person can carry on. You just have to initiate that conversation, and if the person wants to talk and needs to share, they will. We might say something like, sounds like you're really down today, or it sounds like you have had a really good day. It doesn't always have to be the negative. You might say, as you're listening, that sounds so overwhelming. And that gives the person the opportunity to continue to share their story. But your entrance for them, your vehicle for them, are short phrases like this that open the door for them to share.
You can also respond with paraphrasing to help clarify the conversation. Like, what I hear you saying is what I hear you saying is that? Am I hearing you say? It seems like what you're saying is, and these are ways to draw the conversation and carry it forward.
Let's take the one, it seems like what you're saying is. It seems like what you're saying is that you're so worried and concerned because of your financial condition right now. Would you like to share about that a little bit more so I can understand? And maybe we can help you in some way. Perhaps you might not want to say the last part that I just said, because that's something else you have to learn. What kind of promises that you're going to make to somebody that you're sitting there, and they're very vulnerable. So you don't make promises, and that's one of our clarification issues at the series. But the fact that you want to help them, just talking about it. Another area is exploring the problem, just like I had mentioned before. When you explore the problem, you help them to work their way through. You might say something like, tell me more about that concern that you have over the finances. Would you feel more comfortable telling me more about, and then you say whatever it is. I'm wondering what you're thinking right now. Anything that will open the door to them talking and doesn't end in a yes or no answer is a wonderful opportunity to allow that person that you visited to share their story.
And then there's another area, exploring resources. It's like helping the person to discover some things that might be of assistance, like, and what do you think would happen if you did that? Or what is the worst thing that could happen to you? What are your worst fears? In which you give the person an opportunity to unburden themselves or share some of that. Or maybe the first thing you could take care of is, and allow them to fill in what that is.
And as I said earlier, clarifying what the person is saying, you might say something like, you seem to be worried about your husband and your children. And then you let them go on to say what it is that is concerning them. Another one of the clarification tools, if you will, is that you might say, now, if you could have a wish right now, what would your wish be? And that gets them to share some of the things that are going on in their heart and in their spirit. Now, we've shared a lot about being a good listener, going to the hospital, going to the nursing home, at home. Even these things with your children, with your teenagers, are all important helps to conversation. But I don't want to forget, Ed, there's another area, the area of cards and letters, bringing food, bringing a flower, praying with people. These are all other areas, more areas in which we can reach out to be a good Samaritan. We have a friend in Hartley, Nona, and Nona makes these beautiful cards, and they are so simple. She walks down the road and she picks a little wildflower and she puts it between the wax paper and a book, and then she'll just paste that on a card, and then she'll give a scripture verse, and inside she'll just say something that she wants to say as encouraging to that person. That's a simple thing that we can do. We can buy cards, we don't have to make them, but that's so personal. I remember receiving some of her cards. We can write letters. You know, these things, the writing of letters and cards, those are things that even a shut-in in your own home, if you're shut in and you can write and you're there all day, you might go through the bulletin at church for those that are sick, get some names and addresses, and let that be a little ministry that you carry on right from your home. As a matter of fact, we had a woman in Hartley that was a diabetic, and she has since passed away. But she had a little telephone ministry, and she would call people that she knew were also alone, and she would call and check up on them, check up on the elderly.
Another way, speaking as a man, food is important also. You can give little gifts of food that would make someone feel special, especially if they're by themselves or alone. And when you take something that you can share, you can have a cup of coffee, perhaps, if they're able to drink coffee, and make it a time of sharing also.
Now, some of the things we'd like to share with you now are what's called the cliches. And the reason we get caught in these cliches is because we don't know what to say. For instance, some of the things that we just got through sharing, we don't have an avenue, and we want to reach out, and we've heard these statements over and over again, and we pick them up. So we're in a situation, and a little boy perhaps is just travailing over maybe the loss of a parent or the loss of a grandparent, and this little boy's crying. And people will walk up and say, big boys don't cry. These are the be strong cliches that can be very damaging. But we're not saying them to be damaging. We're trying to give comfort. But we need to learn some of those phrases that, like I said, that we had before, that actually give comfort. So one of the other terms that you may have said is, you must be strong for the children, or that's nature's way. These are just a few of the be strong statements that we make that can be very hurtful and harmful.
Another cliche in grief is the hurry up cliche. It's kind of like you want people to move on and move beyond. It's like, you're not your old self, or time will heal, or you're young and you'll be able to make a new life for yourself.
I'd like to go back to the one on you're not your old self. Reading some books on grieving and speaking to someone who's in grief, one of the authors pointed out that it's true. You're not your old self, and you're never going to be the same person you were before you had that tremendous loss. You're going to be another person. And so as friends, when we reaching out, not to put this kind of a guilt trip on a person, but just to understand that that old friend you had in that circumstance isn't going to be the same, and you have to meet this new friend.
Another cliche is the guilt cliche. It's where someone is suffering and you say to them, oh, count your blessings, or only the good die young. Think of all your precious memories. Or if you look around, you can always find someone who's worse off than yourself.
And again, I want to emphasize that when we say these things, we're not saying them to be mean. We feel inadequate and we think we're helping, but we're not helping at all. And then there's the ones about God. God needs him more than you do. He's happy now, for he is with God. God needed some new flowers in his garden in heaven. It was God's will. Or God never gives us more than we can handle. How many times we've said those things to people thinking that we're bringing comfort, and yet it's like a sting to the soul. What kind of a God is going to take my child because he wants him in a garden in heaven? That's the kind of response and reaction that can happen and be very hurtful. And then the last one of these 5 areas is to discount, to say, oh, I know just how you feel. Well, you know, silence is golden. Now, if there's anything I can do for you, just call me. Right there. Don't say, if there's anything I can do for you, just call me. Do something. Take over a meal. Walk in the door. Say hi. Send a card. Send a letter. Pick up the phone. Make a phone call. That's what we need to be doing, because nobody that I have ever said that to in years past has ever called me and asked me to do something.
Another point there is they talk about you can have more children, or it's better to have loved than lost than never to have loved at all. Those are really painful things, especially if you've walked with someone who has lost someone. You know that while they're in the pain and while they're, getting through this and going through that time of bereavement, it doesn't help at all for these type of cliches to be said. They only seem to wound and cause pain.
Well, today we have gone a little deeper into the things that are helpful, the things that are hurtful, and we hope that they have been a help to you. We want to invite you to call us at 806-365-4651 if you have any questions, or if you have any input, any ideas that we might share at another time with people, things that cause us to be good Samaritans in the little ways of life, in the little moments of life, and that we can be there for people when they are in stress and not be afraid. And this is a point for right now, is you will feel inadequate. We all feel inadequate. I think when we were trained in a hospice training, the thing that stood out to me the most and just kind of set me free was when the trainer said, I still feel inadequate when I walk in a room. I still don't know exactly what I'm going to say, and I don't know exactly what's going to be the reaction, because that we have to leave up to the Holy Spirit, that He will guide us in what we're going to say.
One of the things that is important to remember is that our children learn deeds of kindness by watching what we do. And if we're doing Good Samaritan actions, we're reaching out to those who are sick and to our neighbors. And it's good to take them with you when it's possible. They learn from that, and they, really respond to that. Their hearts are open to it. And I remember there's another country song that says, I've been a-watching you, and it's about a father and his boy. And to remember that we can really give those good examples and show them how to conduct themselves.
We ask for your continued prayers and support as we work to complete the Loretto on the Plains Respect Life Care Home at the Holy Family Ministry Center in Hartley. We ask you to contact us at the number I gave you before, 365-4651, with your prayers, your requests, your questions, and for materials that we can provide for you. We would also like to hear from you on the issues that you would like to have us discuss.
Let's move on to our closing prayer now. Father, help us to be able to clearly see and be aware of our neighbor. Open our eyes and prepare our hearts through your merciful love to move beyond our fears of what to say, what to do, and the fear of the cost in time and money as we make the effort to stop beside our neighbor. Help us to refocus our lives to be in alignment with your culture of life. Help us to know what particular area you want us to focus on as individuals or families. Give us the courage to boldly step forward in serving those who are suffering around us. And we thank you for another opportunity to respond to your call.
May the love and mercy of God follow you and be with you throughout the days, weeks, and months ahead as you walk in His grace and seek to do His will. And may Mother Mary hold you close to her heart and be with us all, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
preceding program was brought to you by Loretto on the Plains Personal Care Home, an outreach of Holy Family Ministry Center in Hartley, Texas. The address is Box 383, Hartley, Texas 79044. If you would like to speak to Ed and Nan Weber, the founders, you can call them at 806-365-4651, 365-4651.